I'm ready. 6 weeks ago, Benjamin Netanyahu was elected the leader of the opposition Likud Party in Israel. As the Middle East peace talks continue in Washington, Netanyahu stands as the strongest candidate to replace Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in the next Israeli election. Netanyahu, a former deputy foreign minister and ambassador to the United Nations, has just published A Place Among Nations, Israel and the World, and I'm pleased to have him here. Welcome. Conor Cruz O'Brien wrote a review in the New York Times, rather complimentary of this, and when I read it, I said, my gosh, this must be one of your best friends.
Well, he is now.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I want to talk about the book, but let me first talk about the peace talks. Sure. Where do you think they are? There is this story, it was in the New York Times too, that among the notions that are being floating around these peace talks are you, the Palestinians, better settle now, better come to an agreement now, because Netanyahu will not be as much in favor of land for peace as Rabin is.
Well, if I'm the great inducement to Arab compromise, I'll be very pleased if that's my contribution to Arab flexibility. I suspect that some people are also telling the Israeli government that if you don't sew a deal up fast enough, you might be replaced by somebody else. I think that we should negotiate on the issues and not on electoral prospects. I think it's a much better way to negotiate the future of Israel, and not on short-term cycles of who's going to be in power in the next elections, but what kind of peace will endure beyond signing the peace treaty.
How are you confident, assessed where those negotiations are?
Well, I'm worried, and it seems on the basis of all indications, the sentiment on the Israeli street, just walking and talking to people, and all the polls that have been taken this week, that the government has gone too far, too fast, and that most people say, hold it. This is not the Sinai where you can afford to just be very generous, and it's 7 days tank time from Israel. It would take the Egyptian army, if Egypt ever violated the peace, a full week to get to Israel. When you're talking about the West Bank right now is 2-3 miles from the suburbs of Tel Aviv. You're talking about the Golan Heights. The Syrian army could be perched right on top of the north of Israel. So people are much more sensitive to this. They want peace, as we all do, but they want a peace that could be defended. And they're afraid that a wholesale unilateral withdrawal would produce the opposite of peace.
Yeah. How do you stand on settlements, and how is your policy different from Ariel Sharon?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Mr.
Well, but
Sharon.
I mean, you know how he stands on settlements. He wants to build faster and more, and Mr. Rabin has stopped.
Well, I think that we're going to have a peace in which Israel can defend itself. I think that the West Bank is a wall. I mean, it's hard for your viewers to visualize this, but I suppose if this is Israel on a narrow coastline, this is a wall called the West Bank that guards it from any entry to the east. And what we have, in fact, on this wall are Jews and Arabs living together. This was, in fact, no man's land. It was occupied first by Jordan illegally up to the Six-Day War. And then Israel rolled back an Arab attack and got control of this territory since the Six-Day War. Now, the future of this territory is now going to be solved. I don't know if in this current round of negotiations. I doubt it. We have an extended two-phase strategy of negotiating an interim settlement and a few years down the line a final settlement. But I say that we're not going to have a separation, a forced separation. I don't want to push the Arabs out, and I don't think the Arabs should push the Jews out. We're going to have to live together on that piece of land. And I think that this idea that is floating around since the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, that you can make peace by hermetically separating peoples, ethnically cleansing certain pieces of terrain and land so that majorities have the place and the minorities are kicked out, is an idea that I don't want to apply either to Jews or to the Arabs. We're not going to kick the Arabs out, and they're not going to kick us out. We're going to have to live together.
But is this an overt criticism of the Vance-Owen plan for Bosnia-Herzegovina?
No, I think that the removal, the physical removal of people, is something I don't.
By the Bosnian Serbs.
Sure. If the idea persists, and the Palestinians have been very forceful in presenting it, that a majority that has a minority in it cannot ask that minority to be part of that of the country, even if it gets civil rights. But that the minority has the right to demand, we want independence. Why? Because we want it. We don't want to live under you. Not in a military government, but as equal citizens, enfranchised, with full civil rights. If this idea takes hold, that any minority can declare itself an independent sovereignty, I think it's a fragmentation bomb thrown into the fabric of the nation.
Yeah, but of course you know as well as I do that when they talk about the West Bank, they're talking about, they look back to the '67 war and say it was territory that was formerly part of Jordan that was taken in that war.
How was it taken?
By military force.
Yeah, I'll tell you how it was taken. They neglect one thing. They say, all right, look, at the beginning of the war, the West Bank was in Arab hands.
Right.
At the end of the war, the West Bank is in Israeli hands. Therefore, Israel is to blame. What they neglect to say...
Well, they say that was land conquered by the Israelis in war, even though the invasion was not initiated by Israel.
Well, that's a small matter. You know, in the court of public opinion, as in any court, the question of who attacked whom is of central importance to the verdict. And what the Arabs have continuously done is reverse the causality. They show our presence in the West Bank as being the cause of the conflict, but not the result of it as it actually was. They attacked us and we got in there. One of the things that I do in this book is treat these neat reversals of truth, of historical fact, of political realities that I think has permeated the discussion about the Arab-Israeli conflict, and I've tried to put the record straight with considerable rigor.
What you say in this book, you do, and what you say in this book is that the West Bank, that the Palestinians have a homeland and it's called Jordan. And that's essentially your point, is it not?
Well, I think that Jordan happens to be a country with a Palestinian majority. Nobody will argue that, including King Hussein or Yasser Arafat. They both agree on that. And the co-nationals of these people, of these Palestinians, live on both sides of the Jordan River, one side on the West Bank and the other side on the East Bank. I'm arguing that a solution between us and the Palestinian Arabs has to be a solution between two peoples in two states. And I'm saying that between Jordan and Israel, we have enough room, enough space to decide where the border will be and to decide how those who live on our side of the border will have equal rights and will be enfranchised and will live and conduct their daily lives in their own fashion, and how we will have security. What I'm arguing is that a tenable solution will be done in the context of these two states, principally in the border negotiations. Sure, they'd like to push the border westward, and we like to push it eastward, or at least maintain it where it is, but that's a far different statement than the proposition that we insert a third state, a second state with a Palestinian majority, albeit a very artificial one, in the West Bank, like a fist poised to choke Israel's vital artery to the sea. I'd much rather have a solution that we can all live with, and I mean that, literally, live with it.
Would a Netanyahu as prime minister and head of the Likud Party ever give up part of the Golan Heights to Syria in exchange for some peace treaty with Syria?
Charlie, you've been reading Conor Cruz O'Brien, his book. He speculates that I would do that if I were elected prime minister, but he is a very feisty and imaginative thinker.
He makes the argument that the esteemed Menachem Begin of your party, a hero of Israel, was able to negotiate with Anwar Sadat over the Sinai.
Well, I'll say two things. First, when I come to the negotiations, to answer your question directly, I come in on the last remaining land after the Six-Day War, taken by Israel after the Six-Day War. Last because 91% of the land that we took in this war of self-defense, when we were attacked, we ceded to the Arabs, and I mean the Sinai Desert. That's 91% of the territory that Israel took in a war of self-defense. We're now left negotiating about 9%. And this 9%, unlike the flat expanses of the Sinai, is a wall. One part of this wall is the West Bank Mountains. The second part of that wall is the Golan Heights. And this wall separates Israel's fragile coastline, where all of the cities and airfields and industrial sites are located, and the great Arab armies to the east. So you cannot make a parallel between the Golan Heights, say, and the Sinai, because they're not at all parallel. They're different. I'll tell you what I would do. I would come into this negotiation and say to the Syrians who attacked us from the Golan Heights, I would say to them exactly what they say to us. I want it all. I think I need the 17-mile strip whose only use is a base to attack me. And I'd much rather have a peace where I'm sitting on top of it.
You're saying negotiate from strength.
Yes. I'm saying if they can ask everything, having attacked us from these heights, why shouldn't I, who was attacked from them, demand the same? We come into the negotiations asking everything, I suppose. How it comes out, I don't know. But I do know one thing. If, as I suspect this government is doing, it comes into the negotiations offering everything, then you can end up pretty close to nothing. So I would, as you can presume, negotiate differently.
I want to turn to a lot of things, but I want to give you a chance to make the point about this book. I mean, what new are you saying about Israel and the world in this book? What is the message that you bring in this book to people who care about the survival and the future of Israel?
There are two principal ideas here that I've tried to put across among many. The first one is that we can achieve peace in the Middle East between Israel and the Arabs, providing we understand what kind of peace it is we're trying to achieve. I think in the world there are two types of peace. The peace of democracies, which require no strength and no deterrence, and no armies and no territories and no land barriers, because democracies by their nature tend to peace. But there's another kind of peace, and that's the peace of deterrence, the peace opposite dictatorships, where the only thing that keeps the peace is the inability of the dictatorships or the despotisms to go to war. I think in this century, the greatest tragedies occurred when the democracies failed to distinguish one type of peace from another. Towards Nazi Germany, they practiced appeasement, the peace of democracies, and they got war. Towards the Soviet Union, the greatest despotism in history, they practiced deterrence and got half a century of global peace. When we come to the Middle East, the central observation that is often forgotten and just strewn aside, is that there are no democracies there except for Israel. So the only kind of peace that can endure, by the way, not only between Israel and the Arabs, between Kuwait and Iraq, between Libya and Algeria,
Let me raise this
is
point.
a peace that can be defended. If to make the peace you say to Israel, strip yourself of the defensive wall of the Golan Heights or the West Bank, and the Arabs will sign a piece of paper, then you'll have a formal peace. But the next day, the temptation to violate it from one of these despotisms.
Yeah, but a lot of other people will come to you, as you know, but not only, and it just may represent, I'm not sure what the polls are, and you're much more in tune with what the polls in Israel are saying, but there is a significant portion of the Israeli population that is prepared to trade land for peace and do not want to live in the state of war that they have lived in since 1948.
Well, I agree with you.
You know, and clearly want to and have a different idea about what is the best definition of Israeli security and how's the best way to get it.
I agree with you that there are different definitions among Israelis. I think the great majority believe that Israel has to retain, if not all, most of this territory, and certainly
Both
physical
the Golan
control.
and the West Bank?
Yes. For example, they had a poll on Israeli television 3 nights ago, and 77% said they opposed any significant withdrawal from the Golan Heights.
And what percentage of them favor the reinitiation of settlements, the beginning of...
I don't think that was asked, but I don't think that's a major issue. I'll tell you what I think is the issue, because this is an important idea. We can have peace with the Arabs if it's a defensible peace. To defend ourselves and defend the peace, we need this wall, or at least control of, if not all of it, then most of it on the minds of most Israelis, even those who don't share my views. Arabs happen to live on this wall. These Arabs attacked us before, several times. That's how we got to be on the wall in the first place. We have to find a solution that says to these Arabs, you can live your lives with minimal interference from us. We offer you autonomy. You conduct your daily affairs, you conduct it. We don't.
And run your own police force.
Yes, in the locales.
Right.
That's in your own locales, not in the open terrain. Most of the West Bank is empty, by the way. That's another thing that people don't know. Most of the West Bank, 80% of it is open country.
Let me come to this last quick point, because I got a lot of other things I want to cover in a limited amount of time. Les Gelb, the columnist for the New York Times, recently wrote a column, which you may have seen, saying the one thing that might unite and be an impetus to some kind of peace treaty and some kind of peace in your region of the world is the fear of the spread of Islamic fundamentalism, that both Syria, the PLO, Israel, has some real fear of the spread of Islamic fundamentalism, and that might be an impetus to some kind of coming together. Is there any merit in that argument?
There is some merit. I think there is a limitation on how far it goes. We are concerned, certainly, with the growth of Islamic fundamentalism. Algeria is, Egypt is. Ever since the rise of the first overtly Islamic republic in Iran in 1980, we've had the winds of this fanaticism spreading eastward and westward, both to Asia, the minorities, the Muslim minorities there, and to our part of the Middle East. So obviously we're concerned with it. I'm less concerned with it in the, I don't think that it's quite as neat a division in the Arab world as my friend Les Gelb would like to think. But I think the greatest danger is the possibility that this Islamic Republic, Iran, will acquire nuclear weapons. An armed Islamic Republic, an armed Islamic fundamentalism is a new development in the history of the world, and it would pose tremendous dangers. Nothing that we will do on our side of the world, no peace that we concoct with the Syrians or the Palestinians, conjure up or even cement, will affect that fanaticism.
Explain to me this phenomenon. You, as a campaigner for the leadership of your party and a man who wants to be prime minister of his country, went before on television and was accused of having an extramarital affair and went on television, being the public person you did, and said, yes, I had an affair, but what is even more wrong than me having an affair, and the person who can be most affronted by that is my wife, and that's a personal matter, but this, in fact, is an attack by an enemy within the Likud Party. What did that do to your campaign? Did it injure it, or did you develop sympathy for you? What happened for those of us who watched that from across the ocean?
Well, it was very painful. It was painful for my wife. It was painful for my family. It was painful for me. It's something that clearly I can tell you I regret that it ever happened.
How did you survive it? What do you think was the phenomenon at work?
Well, I thought the issue was had to be faced, and faced clearly and openly and honestly, and that's what I did. Now, the effects of the campaign obviously were such that it didn't affect the campaign in a significant way because I won.
Do you believe you were set up by a competitor in the Likud Party?
Well, I can tell you that this matter is still being investigated by the Attorney General in the country right now. The police has submitted a preliminary report, and it's still under investigation. I prefer not to talk about it.
But can you just tell me if there's any evidence of that it was somebody in the Likud Party who wanted to stop your march towards leadership of your party?
Well, I'm going to say again, until this investigation is complete, I'm really not going to add any more information on it. It really is under investigation.
One last quick question about Israeli politics. Do you expect to see the election in 1996 will be a popular election? For the first time in Israel, it will be a direct popular election for prime minister. Many say because of your skills as a communicator, it'll put you at an advantage. Do you expect to see a change of government before 1996 because of the coalition that Labor has? Do you think that coalition will fall apart because you have promised a hot summer in 1993?
Hot but lawful. I want you to be sure about that. A lot of action in the parliament and on the street. Whether or not this will bring down the government remains to be seen, because technically they have the majority. You have to get...
But it's fragile now because of what's gone on with the violence in Israel and closing...
Well, there's an inter-coalition squabble right now that's happening, but I think the underlying factor, the underlying pressure, is that the majority of the Israeli public is very concerned, very wary with the negotiating tactics. One of the ministers, Mr. Derry, a minister in the government, called it schlemiel tactics of negotiations. That's what he said yesterday. Schlemiel tactics of negotiations, or incompetent tactics of negotiations that could produce results that are the opposite of peace. So I think that is what is causing the instability. My job is not merely to oppose Mr. Rabin when I think that the country's interests are endangered. My job is to replace Mr. Rabin. That's what oppositions are supposed to do.
So if you can break up that coalition, then more power to you.
Well, in a parliamentary democracy, that's what you're supposed to do, and I'll try to do my job.
Benjamin Netanyahu, you know him as the ambassador to the United Nations from his country, also as deputy #2 man in the American embassy when Moshe Aarons was there, was it? Right. And then he went back and became deputy foreign minister. You also saw him a lot during the Persian Gulf on CNN and other places. It's a pleasure to have him. The book is called A Place Among the Nations, Israel in the World. He lays out his vision of his country and where it is and its legacy and its future. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John.
Great to have you. We'll be right back. The American Ballet Theater. Take a look at this clip.